At midnight, when the owls sing Take Me Back Home by Thursday Simpson. We finally went for a walk after staying indoors all winter, making one pot of tea and then another. First, I made so many pots of peppermint tea from Oregon and tried to actually enjoy television and, after that, using the Egyptian chamomile. I tried inviting this friend over and fucking this one guy just this one time because I was cold. Finally, the air was beginning to smell like wet dirt. Jamie and I were out for a walk. Our apartment smelled great after we left our windows open all night. We woke up in the morning and after I made her breakfast, we started walking. "I'm having Michael over for dinner tonight," Jamie said. "Okay, that's cool," I said. "Is it cool if I eat with you guys?" "Jesus Christ, Maggie. Why the fuck wouldn't it be okay if you fucking ate with us?" "Is it that big of a deal asking first?" We crossed over a bridge above the highway, one of my favorite parts of town. If you're driving below it, on the highway, you wouldn't notice that you're driving underneath neighborhoods. On either side above the bridge, there are houses and a park and everything that goes with all of that. But if you're down driving on the highway, it's almost impossible to notice any of it because you'll look up for a second and only see woods. "I went to church the other day," Jamie told me. "Why?" "I don't know. I was just bumming around on Sunday morning and there was this church service going on, and this dude standing out front wearing this cute purple vest over a sweater, and he asked me if I wanted to come in and sit in on their church service, and he had the sexiest lisp and Morrissey haircut, and I thought, why the fuck not? So I did. It was really weird." "And so you went to church?" "I went to church." "Did you go back?" "No, I didn't really want to go back. I don't really know why I even went in. I didn't want to, really, but I guess I did. So I went in." "What did they even do?" "Mostly this 40-year-old dude just talked into a headset about sex and how guys are idiots and not real men because they beat off and watch porno all the time. And then there was some shitty indie rock music intermixed into all of it. I feel bad for a lot of those guys." "Me too." "I like watching porn." "Yeah, sometimes I do too. But I hate indie rock. It sounds so fucking dumb. It's like this little flaccid dick just hanging there, kind of limp and shit." "You're seriously right." Jamie and I were at the park at this point. Back home I had laundry to do. I asked Jamie, "Where was this church at? I'll remember to avoid it when I go out for coffee this Sunday." Saying this made me think of all the times this winter I walked downtown in sweatpants at 5 a.m. to get a drink. I was always too tired to make coffee, and the cold made my first cup all that more wonderful. Next to Teaspoon's fireplace and drinking my coffee, anything seemed possible. Thinking about this out at the park made me want coffee. I didn't see the woman standing in front of us before we both stopped. There was a woman standing in front of us. There wasn't anything special about her, really, other than how much she surprised us, but then she didn't say anything when we started asking her questions. "Oh, hi, sorry." She didn't say anything. "Are you okay?" She didn't say anything, but she raised her right hand so that it was parallel with her mouth, and she stuck out her index finger at each one of us, one at a time. Her eyes didn't change. I asked her again, "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" Jamie was standing next to me, and I heard her say Maggie. And the woman standing in front of us kept standing there. She kept her hand parallel with her mouth. I thought I started to hear her speaking to us, but then I decided I was wrong. She moved her finger, first pointing at me and then at Jamie, just like before, only this time her eyes got bigger and bigger. "Hey, why the fuck are you guys just standing in the middle of the fucking road?" I jumped and turned around, and there was a guy leaning out of his car window. We moved out of the way, and he drove by. The woman standing in front of us was gone. We didn't see her anywhere around us. What the fuck was that about, Maggie? We finished walking our trail, I guess because we didn't exactly have any other options. Neither of us really said anything, though. There really wasn't anyone else around. Just a few women with their children on the swinging sets and a couple older men sitting at picnic tables eating their lunches. I assumed birds were all around us in the trees singing. Jamie's boyfriend came over for dinner just like she said he would. It was good to see him. I didn't know if we should tell him about what happened or not, but Jamie went ahead and did that. "Huh, that's kind of fucking weird," he said. We agreed with him. I helped Jamie cut up mushrooms in the kitchen. She was baking chicken thighs to go with the white cream sauce she made. Jamie's boyfriend talked about how great of a cook she was, but I was the one who knew we had some Sauvignon Blanc left over from a few weekends before. I was the one who reminded Jamie that the mushrooms don't really keep well. After we ate, all three of us watched a little television. Jamie's boyfriend liked the show Numbers, so we watched it. I didn't know if Jamie liked Numbers or not, but I guess that doesn't really matter. Jamie actually left with her boyfriend and walked back with him to his place. She got up in his ear, biting him, and whined, "I don't want to be alone tonight." I think crime television is ridiculous. I tried to give my interest to something else, but it didn't really work that well either, so I just went to bed early. I had a dream, a really fucked up dream. I was wearing a black dress with a black veil, and I thought I looked pathetically goth. Then I noticed I was holding a man in my arms, a man I had never met before. He tried to lean in and look up and smile at me, and he tried to say, "Don't worry, everyone's afraid to be a little gothic, to wear a little nightshade in their hair, but it's where we all come from." I'm not sure how I noticed, but I realized I was crying. I was sad for this man. We kept dancing. I wanted to make love with him, even right there in this room, with all the black lace dripping off the walls, with the strange sounds that weren't sounds all around us. That would have been fine. This man I was holding and kind of dancing with kept trying to look up at me, and he said, "I wish we could have known each other. I bet we could have been great together." "We still can be. We can be friends. I know we can," I told him. And he looked up at me with very large, sunken, and open brown eyes and said, "I would like to be friends with you too, but now isn't the time. This is just not correct at all." "We still can," I started yelling. "Please, no, seriously, right here. Let's fuck right here. It'll be fine. It'll bring love to this horrible fucked up place. Wherever we are, seriously. We need to be together." I tried taking off my clothes and started kissing this man, but he said, "Please, Maggie, don't let go of me. Please don't let go of me now." After I woke up, I looked in Jamie's room to see if she came home early in the morning, but no. Her boyfriend is so fucking stupid. Always, "Yeah," and "fucking right, Maggie." I boiled a pot of hot water and made a smaller pot of Irish breakfast tea. I usually make too much, but I always enjoy filling the pot up as full as I can. There's just something very fulfilling about making a very large pot of tea at any time of the day. I drove out to the park where we saw that strange woman. When I was driving under the little bridge, I tried to pay very close attention and see what details I could make out about how the neighborhoods were actually positioned behind the trees that hide them. If you don't know there were houses, all you would see are trees. But it's incredible. A school has a soccer field that isn't 30 seconds from the highway. There are most likely over 500 people living less than a minute from a major traffic vein, but from the road all you see are trees. And even knowing how this exact spot looks from up on the traffic bridge, none of it makes any sense. Once I got to the park, I didn't want to think that I wasted my gas, so I went for a walk. There weren't many people in the park that I noticed. When I got to the halfway mark, it was almost kind of funny. I wasn't listening to any music, but I was very spaced out, and this little black cat jumped out from behind a tree. He just stood on the walking path and stared at me with his little yellow eyes. When I got close to him, he walked over in the grass and laid down, and he watched me. Every now and then I looked back, and there he was, his yellow eyes fixed on me, lying there as calm as you can be. When I got back to where I was parked, I decided to go around again. Then, a minute or two later, I saw this young Italian girl. She couldn't have been older than 7 or so, but you can definitely tell that at least one of her parents was Italian. She was standing there, holding a German Shepherd, and I love German Shepherds, but it kind of got me. That little girl had that huge dog completely under her control. She was just standing there, alone in the park around 10 a.m. with her dog. I waved at her. She smiled and waved back, and I kept walking, but I didn't look back to see if she was still there, watching me. Everything else that day was basically fine. I saw people and people came to see me. That night I was sitting at home thinking about going out for a glass of wine. There's a fairly nice wine bar down a few blocks from my apartment, but I decided it wasn't worth the money. I would probably just end up sitting there, wanting to talk to someone, and then not talking with anyone, and wasting my money on wine that I didn't want in the first place. So, I made a pot of peppermint tea, and I sat in my apartment and read for a little bit, and then I remembered that I needed to do my laundry. After I thought about it and tried to breathe for several minutes, I packed everything up into this dumb tan shoulder bag I bought a few years ago and went outside. I started walking to the laundromat. Spring is nice, even if you know summer won't be. Spring is always nice, as a rule. A few buildings before the laundromat, I thought I might have heard something strange. A sound, a type of singing or something. I stopped and looked at the building in question. There were no lights on in the windows or anything. It was all made from deep brown bricks. I don't know what I thought I heard, but I still could have almost swore that I thought I heard it. I could almost swear that I heard something even still. But nothing else caught my eye, so I started walking and concentrating on my laundry. I sat inside the laundromat that night, staring at the bright blue and green paint on the walls, smelling the actually very pleasant laundry smell. That smell will be your only reward for doing this painful activity. As I get deeper and deeper into my 20s, I learn over and over not to apologize for considering psychic pain real pain, physical pain. I sat there and waited for my laundry to dry. That night, in my dreams, I saw several people watching me. Their eyes were blank. Not in the sense of a blank expression, but completely void and colorless. No irises, no whites. They all just stood there watching me. And then I saw him. His eyes weren't blank. He was tied to a table and he was crying. He was screaming, apparently for me. The others just stood there and watched. When I woke up, I didn't know what to do, so I went for another walk at the same park. On the way, I looked up at those same trees and wondered if I could tell this time if the houses and school were still there. For the next several weeks, I did the exact same thing every day. I listened to different albums by the Dresden Dolls and Oasis while I walked, and then I listened to them again in my car driving home. Exercise is important, and there was never anything else to do. Probably my most frequent activity besides walking at the park was eating dinner, and sometimes even lunch with Jamie and Michael. One night Jamie made pasta for Michael and I, and we were eating it, and Jamie said, "All right, Maggie, I want to ask you something." It was July. I just stared at her and waited. Jamie said, "Michael has this friend we both want you to meet. We were all out having drinks the other night, and we got to talking about you, and he thought you sounded cool, and we decided that we should all go out together this weekend. What do you think?" I stared back at her and said okay. Jamie and Michael both sat there and smiled and kind of stared at me. I didn't like the silence, so I asked, "Does he want to fuck me?" Jamie said, "You'll just have to ask him, Maggie." I went for a walk at the park before we all went out. I almost didn't because I didn't want to take a shower afterwards, but instead I just decided not to take a shower. If he wanted me, he would just need to love it. His name was Ben. We all met at a bar downtown. Michael, Jamie, and I walked there together, and Ben came in shortly after, and we got a table. We ordered bread and drinks and sat there for a while making small talk. Something inside me had to smile. All of us ordered Pinot Noir, Ben included. It had really been a while since I'd been out with anyone. Jamie and I used to go out a fair amount before she was with Michael. We never really went home with that many people, though. The two of us even tried dating for a while. Jamie and I both considered ourselves bi, and our chemistry wasn't even all that bad. Some things just don't stick, I guess. Even still, I missed going out to bars only with Jamie and drinking wine for hours. I guess that's why it made me so happy when the four of us were drinking Pinot Noir. Man, I really like these golden lamps everywhere. It really sets an interesting mood with these dark old benches. I really like this place. I come here sometimes by myself at night. Sometimes. Do you guys ever come here? Not really, I said. I don't really like alcohol. Or bars. That's good, Michael said, staring straight at me. I liked the way he looked at me while he said that, and so I said, good, and stared right back at him with the same stoic, blank look he was giving me. I'm glad, I said. Then I asked, are you circumcised? I mean, I only ask because I hate it when I'm with a guy and all of a sudden his cock looks like a sausage falling out of its casing. Then I asked, are you circumcised? I mean, I only ask because I kind of hate it when I'm with a guy and all of a sudden his cock looks like a sausage falling out of its casing. Ben laughed, but Jamie and Michael didn't. They just kind of got nervous. Ben said, yeah, I'm circumcised. I look more like a kind of puffy or swollen pink mushroom than anything. Ben was smiling, but I kept giving him that blank and stoic stare he gave me in the first place and just said, okay. The rest of the night went fine. We had a few drinks. After the Pinot Noir, we all moved on to a bottle of Syrah from France. I was impressed Jamie suggested it instead of the Spanish Tempranillo. Not all that long before we asked for our checks, I drank a glass of absinthe just to see how Ben would respond. He smiled when I ordered it, and he smiled the whole time I poured the hot water over the sugar cube, and he kept smiling while I drank the absinthe little by little. I watched him watch me, and neither one of us backed down. Jamie and Michael kept letting out these dry laughs like they couldn't believe I was being so weird, but I've never given a fuck what they think. Sometimes Ben smiled, and sometimes he tried to laugh and tell me a joke, but I didn't want to budge. I just kept staring at him with that blank look he came into this with. Michael paid for Jamie and I paid for mine, and Ben paid for Ben, and we all managed to separate ourselves. Jamie and Michael said they were going far away. Something about getting food. They offered us a chance to go with them, but I refused. They kind of smiled and said okay, but I just kept giving them that same blank stare I was giving Ben, that Ben gave me. After they finally left, I grabbed Ben's arm with my arm and led him without a word to this place I liked a few blocks over. It was good of him. He didn't ask a single question. He just let me lead him. This little cafe serves coffee and different light foods late into the night. They exist mostly for vegetarians that like their protein. Being good and wholesome means different things to different people. Thankfully, the smoking ban wasn't official in our state yet. They have hookahs if you want them, off in a separate room, but that just isn't my thing. Not many girls like cigars, though, but I always kind of have. So I bought each of us one, still not saying a word to Ben, and bought each of us a cup of coffee to go with our cigars. Lucky for Ben, our server felt bad for him and asked him what kind of coffee he wanted. He told her dark roast. Okay, then. Off in the corner of the room, there was a very large blue-tinted mirror. Ben just stood there and stared at it. We sat down and Ben watched the mirror the entire time. Our waitress brought us coffee. It came in bold white cups on bold white saucers. We sat down, and the little clink they made my heart race, just a little. Our server offered us a lighter, but I already had one. She cut our cigars, and first I lit mine, and then I lit his. We weren't saying much to each other. We just sat there and smoked for a bit and drank coffee, and then Ben asked me, do they sell booze here, too? I like coffee with this, but I think I'd rather have whiskey or something. I looked at him and didn't say a word. I just raised my hand, and our server and her bright red lipstick and red and white striped shirt came over to our table. I asked her for a whiskey. She asked him what he wanted, and he said a Cutty Sark. I could kind of tell Ben was uncomfortable ordering it, and I wasn't going to make fun of him, and our server didn't either. The whole thing was almost cute. She brought him his whiskey, and he seemed to enjoy it. After a bit, I told him to come over and sit next to me. He didn't even seem to mind that he would no longer face the blue mirror. More time went by with neither of us saying anything, and I asked him, "So, do you think you're coming home with me tonight?" He asked me, "Do you want me to?" I asked Ben another question. "Ben, I want to ask you a question. Say you're dating a girl. Say she's a total piece of shit to you. Say she's violent, abusive. You're able to deal with it for a while. You get along a lot of the time, and these good times make it seem worth it to you. Nothing comes without a price. Say before you move in, you're living at home with your parents somewhere in Ohio or Iowa. Say you have a decent job, one that lets you do basically whatever you want since you live at home. You have a few friends, some shit you like to do, but then somehow you meet this girl and she's incredible. You talk to your parents about her. You tell her how much she moves you, how she offered you the chance to move in with her in the city. Your parents are excited and say they're happy for you, happy that you finally met someone you want to live with. They'll even help you pay for your moving so you don't have to ruin your savings. And you do. You move in with her, and for a while, it's great. And you're having a great new life. She's even paying your bills. You're finally able to play more guitar or write or paint all day and go out and see movies and watch basketball games on TV, and then one night she wants to fuck you and you say you're too tired and she hits you with a bottle of wine. The wine was on the table a second ago. Earlier you were wondering when you were going to open it and drink it together. You're on the ground and she starts kicking you in your stomach and you start crying when you notice the glass in your left hand and she's yelling at you and calling you a bitch. She's screaming, "Quit crying," but you just cry more, and so she keeps kicking you, and you're getting more and more glass in you, and you have no idea how to resolve any of this. Then, after you finally get cleaned off and have sex with her like she wanted in the first place, after the sun comes out and you're still eating her out, and she's kind of laughing and still hitting you, things are more or less normal again. She helped you take the glass out, and it made you feel good. How sweet she was, touching your hair while she poured alcohol on your cuts. You're eating cereal or toast or something, and you're looking at her standing across the room drinking coffee, and you're wondering why you even had to have that fight in the first place. And then, that same fucked up shit happens again and again, maybe once or twice a month. And other than fights, you enjoy being around her, and you're really sure she loves you. It's obvious that no relationship is perfect. That's what you tell your parents on the phone when you talk to them. They ask if you've made any new friends in the city beside her, but you just say that the two of you pretty much stick together, and they're surprised it's going so well, and say how happy they are for you, and it makes you start crying, and you have to hang up so they don't realize you're crying. And then once you're off the phone, you start sobbing. If she isn't there, of course. You used to tell your parents everything, especially the hardest parts of your life, and that's a big reason why they're so happy that you're finally with this person, and so happy. They know how hard your life's been up to this point, and they're finally so happy for you. Then you finally leave the city with her in it to go see your parents for the holidays, and you break down on Christmas Eve and sob and sob and sob and sob back home, telling your parents everything. They say how sorry they are, that they had no idea. Dinner gets cold, and seeing it sitting there and not being eaten makes you cry even more. And you decide that it's a great idea for you just to stay there. She won't come looking for you. And if she does, you don't have to go to the door. They tell you they saw your old boss the other day, and she said that she would love to have you back at work, that everyone would, if you ever happened to move back. So you leave those records and books and blankets and everything you bought back in the city. Your computer there didn't have much important shit on it, and thankfully she didn't have your access password. She'd just sell it, and by then you'd have plenty of time to update all of your different accounts and passwords, and things could just move on. It was a good experience, you tell yourself, but thank God it's over. Then time passes. Then there she is. Whether on the phone or at your doorstep, doesn't matter. She says she misses you. She's, first of all, sorry, and second of all, just wants you back. You want to be with her. When you see her name light up on your cell phone, you smile, and your heart races. Can you imagine that conversation you have with your parents? Do you believe them if they say go ahead and do it if that's what you want? Do you believe that they really think that this can be a good thing? If they're just telling you what they think you want to hear, what does that say? How do you make sense of that last dinner you eat together? How do you react when your mom asks you if there's anything special you want to eat before you move? How do you live in a world like that? If they told you not to go and you did, how would your conversations on the phone sound? Would you still want to call them? Would you even be able to look outside your window in December? Ben, December is my favorite month of the year. Besides October and November, that is. October, November, and December are my holy trinity of months. Ben didn't say anything. The whole time I talked, he kept smoking and drinking, and when I was finished, he curled up against me and nestled his head in the curve of my neck, and I put my hand on his head and pulled him as close as I could, and we just sat there, together. Eventually, the cafe closed, and we left, and I walked home with him. We didn't say very much to each other, but when I got to his door, I started crying, and it really surprised me when he started crying. He said, "They just don't get it, Maggie." He said, "They just don't get it, Maggie." But then he trailed off when he couldn't stop crying. I pulled him into me again and kissed him on his forehead, and we looked at each other for a very long time, and then I walked away. That was a good night, I said to myself as I walked home. The next day was Saturday, and I wanted to take a really long, good nap. After I woke up, I decided I should probably do some laundry. I kind of wanted to spend some time with Jamie, but she wasn't around. I got everything together and went over to the laundromat around 6 p.m. Summer makes things stick, I said to myself. I just wore this tank top and gym shorts, the same ones I used to wear to do laundry every week last summer. For a while, all I could do was think about doing laundry back then. I was with this guy. We always met up and did laundry and had dinner or lunch or whatever while our clothes were drying. Once he ate me out in the bathroom of the laundromat, and when we both walked out, this homeless guy who was always there was staring at us and grinning. I winked at him and got my clothes out of the dryer. No one was around to eat me out this time, so I just went for a walk while my clothes were washing. I thought about calling Ben, but decided it might be a little too soon. That's when I heard those sounds again. I knew they were coming from that same building next to the laundromat. Some things I guess you can just tell. You don't need evidence. I always heard that's how psychics experience their shit. The way we know we have to pee, that we're cold, that we're touching leather, that's how they know whatever it is they know. Our senses speak a language that doesn't involve evidence. I decided to try the door, and it was open, so I figured what the hell, and I walked in. It was a building without any other real characteristics to justify anything else about it. The walls were either dark blue or maybe a lighter blue that just took its time fading. I lived in my neighborhood for almost 3 years and had been going to the same laundromat since I moved in, and never once noticed anyone doing anything remotely involved with this building. Over in the corner was a small wood desk without any drawers, just a tabletop, I guess. I walked over to look at it, and for whatever reason, I got down on my knees and looked underneath. On the other side was an engraving. From Dad to Jeannie. It was a rough carving, probably done with a knife or something. The sounds I heard outside weren't there anymore. Then, out loud, I said, "Where is this?" There were about 5 doors in this empty room with that desk, and I tried one of the 5 doorknobs at random, and the door opened. Through it was another empty room, only without a desk. This room had a single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. I saw over in the corner there was a light switch. The walls inside were painted the same dull blue, but it was peeling a little bit more inside this additional room. And while I wondered if the rooms behind those other 4 doors were also the same as this, I walked over and flipped the light switch, and that single light bulb turned on. I watched the light bulb for a few minutes, and then I went back to finish my laundry. That night I had another dream. I was back in that room with dull blue walls and the light bulb, only this time those same men and women who were there didn't have eyes. I was standing next to that single man they tied to a table, and everyone was surrounding us. I asked the man, "Are they human?" He asked me, "You mean like us?" Then I noticed all those trees I stare at on the way to the park were in the room with us. They were everywhere, and I wondered if the people inside the houses could see us, and wondered if they knew what was going on, and if they did, would they tell me? Would they call the police? These people without eyes were going to kill this man. They brought him here to kill him. I asked the man another question. Is it wrong to say I don't know if they're like us? I don't know either, he said to me. Noises came from the mouths of everyone around us. It sounded like static from a dead television, like radio possessed by the spirit of a man. I don't believe in spirits, but look at them. He pointed to me with his fingers, even though he was still tied to the table. I looked at them, heard the static coming from their mouths, and my friend said, I don't know what gets a hold of me sometimes. When it does, it's just something. He trailed off as I woke up. Michael spent the night with Jamie, and we were all up, so I made us breakfast. Something about the summer and being hot all the time forced me to quit eating meat. There isn't any other way to describe it. My body wouldn't let me because I was sweating too much, feeling too tired. My chest hurt a little. Then, after I quit eating meat, Michael and Jamie did the same thing. I poured all of us a glass of almond milk and was warming up some black bean burgers in the oven. There wasn't really anything else around, and we had an avocado that we needed to use, so I peeled it and spread it over the burger and made some coffee. Michael got a text, and the next thing I know, he's screaming and throwing his phone against the wall. Jamie was with me in the kitchen, and Michael scared her, and she dropped the plates she was holding. Somehow I could feel the glass mixing with the dust underneath our cabinet surface, and Jamie ran to Michael, and he started screaming, Ben's dead, Ben's dead, oh my fucking God, Ben's dead. It took a while to hear the full story. The police had found his body hanging from a tree branch. He was gutted pretty good, they said. No one had any ideas. The police called me in and asked me questions. I didn't have any ideas either. They showed me the photographs and wrote some things down when I didn't react. I guess after a while they realized I wasn't hiding anything, and they let me go home and said they would contact me if they had any further questions. The dream I had the night before Ben was found. I started having it over and over again. The static from their colorless mouths got louder. I knew they were inside that building. I knew they killed Ben inside it. I started sitting outside when I was doing my laundry. It was kind of funny. You can stare at a tablet and pretend you're reading or working on something and just have a camera app up recording every last little thing. I saw a man walk in that building, eventually. Only it wasn't when I was doing my laundry. I was out for a walk. I had never seen him before. He was just a guy. My neighborhood coffee shop wasn't that far away. You couldn't see this building from it, but the way everything worked, when this man left, he would have to walk by this corner you could see from the coffee shop window. I went inside the coffee shop and got a table in front of the window and got a cup of coffee and watched the corner for 2 hours. Thankfully, I had my tablet with me. I used it to listen to music while I walked. I recorded everything. He never came out. Eventually, I got up and decided to leave. I was putting my cup and saucer away, and there he was. He was just standing there, ordering coffee. I couldn't move. He turned around and saw me and looked at me for a couple of seconds, and then he smiled at me and he waved. I didn't smile, but I did wave back. And then I left. When fall came, I started doing dangerous things. Jamie and Michael spent a lot of time in our apartment and were always very nice to me. We still cooked together, went out together, and when they went to bed, I either left to read at a coffee shop with my coat and a few books, or just went to bed myself and watched television. One night, though, we made soup and had fun talking, and they were in bed, and I told them I was going to spend the night reading. What I did instead was spend the entire night in the laundromat. I didn't know anything or expect anything. I think when I left my apartment, I really expected to go to the coffee shop, but instead, I ended up at the laundromat. No one came in the entire night. Not a single person. After a while, I turned off all the lights and sat by the front window and watched the building. No one came in or out. No one jumped out of a dryer or anything ridiculous like that. After I did something that insane, I started doing something much more dangerous. I started spending my nights in the empty building. Jamie and Michael never asked. I never said anything. They probably assumed I was with some other guy because I felt bad for Ben, so I just let them think whatever they wanted. Basically, what I did, I'd take a backpack with some pillows and a sleeping bag and read all night. The first time I did this, I only slept in the first room with the desk. Nothing happened. No one showed up, and it seemed like I stopped dreaming altogether. The second night, I did my reading in the second room with a single light bulb. At first, I didn't want to even turn the light on. I just read with the light of my tablet. Even though there weren't any windows, I was afraid turning on the light would let someone know that I was there where I shouldn't be. But the more I did this, the more comfortable I got, and I started turning on that single light bulb while I'd read and even leave it on while I slept. It wasn't easy sleeping in such a fucking creepy place, so I did a lot of reading. A biography of Aleister Crowley, 2 John Banville books, a book of poems by Mary Swander, Mary MacLane's famous memoir, and several other things, too. I read Helter Skelter because I've always heard it was a classic. I wonder if Charlie really is a mirror for your narratives. At first I hated him because he seemed like a racist murderer and a rapist. But then, the more I read, the more I wondered if that's just what the author wanted him to be. I wondered if anyone really even knew the truth. The devil probably wants us to think he's a great humanitarian, but isn't that the great Christian trick? It's more likely that he was a charismatic, half-sage, half-cult leader, and when his music failed, he snapped. Doesn't the church want to convince us that the person telling the truth is really the devil telling us lies? After all, I've always been very moved by Third Eye Blind's song Slow Motion. Another side of that mirror, we want to believe that even if we are monsters, we're also worth loving. Sometimes I masturbated, alone, in that room. Eventually I just didn't know what else to do. Sometimes I thought of Ben and him coming to visit me while I touched myself. When the images came up of him being strung from that tree, I did the best I could to gently push them away. Not once did anyone else show up there. There was never any unnecessary noise, no strange feelings or presences, just that room with the dull wallpaper. Eventually, I moved that desk Dad made for Jeannie into the second room with the light bulb. It was a good place to keep my books and other this and thats I brought with me. It's true, I never did go behind any of those other doors. I was in the room I was drawn to. I started leaving my blankets and pillows there. They were never disturbed. It didn't seem like any stray animals ever went inside of there. November was in the air. My family wanted me to come home and visit them, but I told them I didn't want to. Jamie and I were having Christmas with Michael. My parents asked me if I had a boyfriend to spend the holidays with. I hadn't told them about Ben, so there was no point to say anything at all. I just told them no. It was Sunday night. Laundromats always smell best on Sundays. Jamie was there with me. She wasn't even doing laundry. Sometimes, even in the winter, it got so hot in there, we just wore t-shirts and gym shorts while we did our clothes. Out of nowhere, Jamie started crying. She started talking. Maggie, I don't even... Pause. I should have told you right after it happened. Another pause. Ben called me after you left him that night. Another pause. He just wanted to get laid. He said he really liked you. We had hung out before, and nothing had ever happened, and I just left Michael and told him you needed me, and he didn't say a fucking word. He just totally believed me, and then Ben and I spent the next day fucking. I left Ben's place. We really didn't have anything else to say to each other at that point. I just left and met Michael at our place and acted like nothing was wrong. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to talk to you about it. I wanted to ask you about Ben, but Michael showed up right away. I couldn't let him think anything was wrong. And then that fucking text, Maggie. Oh my God, Jamie trailed off, so I just said it. I know, Jamie. Jamie stopped crying. She looked at me and her eyes got wide. What? I don't even know how. I just knew the minute we all sat down at that bar together, the very first second we were all together, that you and Ben were going to hook up. What the fuck are you even saying, Maggie? I'm just telling you the truth. I don't even know what to say beyond that. I just knew it. Like, I know when I'm hungry or when I have to pee. To be honest with you, I didn't even want to admit it. I didn't want to believe it. Then I saw him. That man was there. The one from the building. The one from the coffee shop and the wave. When I saw him, he was staring at me. I looked over and tapped Jamie on the shoulder. I told her to look at him, but he was gone when she looked. I told her to call the police and to tell them to come to the building next door to this laundromat. I didn't hear anything Jamie said after that. There was the blue paint. You could see it, even though it was dark in that first room. There was the one door out of 5. It was closed. You could see light coming from underneath the door. It almost sounded like an old church inside. No organ, just voices. That single light was bright. You could see everything, but in real life, their eyes have color. Brown, blue, green, whites, and all. There were no purple robes. There was only the man I saw in my dreams, and he was tied to the desk Dad made for Jeannie. These people were circled all around him, and now he was staring directly at me. They started laughing. They started laughing while they sang and chanted. They stretched their arms out to me. I thought about my hometown. I thought about my parents and Ben's hometown and Ben's parents and the girl Ben must have lost his virginity with, and how he felt that first night. I wondered if it was warm or cold outside. I tried to remember how the air smelled. I wondered what music Ben played afterward, once he was alone. Once I was alone, I listened to The Winter Lady by Leonard Cohen. When did I turn 24? I've never enjoyed being a lonely person. I also wondered what color blanket my parents were currently under while they watched TV. Before that moment, I had never seen or heard a lot of things. Before that moment, I had never heard a real gun fired. I had never seen a real gun. None of them backed down. They tried to charge the 2 officers, but it doesn't matter how fucking dangerous you are when you're charging 2 people with automatic weapons. I had never seen anyone die before. I didn't even move. I'd never even been around people who were used to death. I don't know why the police didn't shoot me or why one of those motherfuckers didn't grab me and try to use me as a hostage. I walked over to the man I saw in my dreams. He was shaking. When the police were shooting, our eyes were locked. Before the police came and everyone was laughing and singing, our eyes were locked. This man, we watched each other the whole time. I held his hand before the police got him untied from the desk. After they untied him, we weren't able to talk for a while. But once that period was over, we talked and cried together quite a bit. We talked and cried together for a very long time, actually. Thursday Simpson is from rural Illinois. She is like a heavy metal Lou Reed and believes in feline Satan and e-books and garlic and onions. Ask her to do an impression of King Diamond and she will probably smile. The music in this episode is by Sealand. You can find more of their work, including their album Dark Days, at sealand.bandcamp.com.